Hi, this is Phil Newman. I am the editor-in-chief of Longevity.Technology, and as part of our work to demystify longevity science and the technologies and opportunities that exist within the longevity economy for investors, corporate participants, and consumers, our market intelligence unit produces deep dive reports. This is covering deep science as well as the commercial routes to market for these technologies, and identifies really a lot of the key drivers that these technologies are going to have for success in longevity. So today we are talking senotherapeutics. Senotherapeutics are often misunderstood. Targeting cellular senescence is always described as senolytics, in which zombie cells in their state are removed from the body. However, targeting senescence is much more than that. Senotherapeutics' potential as a breakthrough mainstream therapy for a lot of diseases is huge. And in fact, as we address in the report, the total market value of diseases that can be addressed eventually with senotherapeutic therapies totals over $127 billion every year. So this is a very important area. There are some key elements of this addressed in today's presentation, as well as in our report. So let me introduce our guests today. Okay, so today we are joined by Dara Campbell, who's the scientific editor at Longevity.Technology, and she heads up our market intelligence unit. Girish Harinath, who's a science writer at Longevity.Technology, and he is also the lead writer of this particular report. And then somebody who actually doesn't really need much of an introduction, but I'll give him one anyway, Aubrey de Grey, who's the Chief Science Officer and co-founder of the SENS Foundation. So welcome, everybody. Great, so Dara, let's hand over to you and you can get us started today.
Brilliant, thank you, Phil. So as part of our market research into senotherapeutics, we conducted a survey on a panel of 18 experts in the senotherapeutic field. The survey was designed to derive well-informed insights on the challenges, opportunities, and potential of senotherapeutics as both a clinical tool for disease care and longevity within the next 5 years. So we're here today with Aubrey, and we're going to ask him the same 6 questions that we asked in our survey and hear his opinion. So the first one that we've got for you, Aubrey, is obviously senescence has systemic effects, and as such, it's thought that senotherapeutics could address several aging-related diseases. What do you believe are the main clinical indications of senescence therapies?
Right. So, I mean, that is precisely the point, that senescent cells seem to have systemic bad effects. They probably also have local bad effects, in other words, to their immediate environment. But yes, the impact of senescent cells on the body in general, on the accumulation of other types of damage in the body, is actually considerably greater than I would have guessed 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And this is, of course, a very good thing, because it means that when we get good at removing senescent cells, which at this point we, as you know, really are getting good, so that means that the benefits will kind of synergize with what we do to directly address other types of damage, which means that we can kind of, get good results even with less high quality ability to attack those other types of damage. The magnitude of the crosstalk between these processes is bigger than I would have expected, and that's really good news. But in terms of which clinical indications, well, the ones that you've already found to be mentioned by other experts are very much the ones I would have mentioned. So osteoarthritis is certainly a very big deal. It was discovered a long time ago, like more than 20 years ago, that the chondrocytes in the articular cartilage are particularly prone to become senescent. This is way back when it was, we were not even very good at figuring out when a cell is senescent and when it isn't. But it seems that they have a very high number of senescent cells, perhaps because they have a rather low number of cells in total, so the cells have to work harder. And so of course, we all know that there was a clinical trial last year that failed from Unity Biotechnology in osteoarthritis. And there are questions, of course, plenty of questions that can be asked about the decisions of the design of that trial, especially the fact that, of course, it was self-reported pain that was being measured, which is always very, very susceptible to placebo effects. But I don't think anyone's really saying that this has, in general, diminished the case for elimination of senescent cells as a treatment for osteoarthritis. I think we just need to do it again, do it better, and we will make that work. The other things that Unity are doing in the eye, and elsewhere, I mean, really the list, you could go on forever, but I rather agree with the list that was given by your other experts.
Brilliant, thank you. So this kind of comes on from that question, but as part of our report, we discussed different xenotherapeutic modalities. So a lot of the time people just say senolytics, but there's lots of different ways that we can target senescence now. So out of senolytics, xenoblockers, xenomodulators, and senescence-associated immunomodulators, what do you believe holds the most promise for targeting senescence? Or could it be combination, or is it specific to kind of the pathology in question?
Yeah, so let's go through these, perhaps not quite in the same order that you just listed them. So, yeah, senolytics, everyone knows what they are, small molecules that can selectively cause senescent cells to apoptose. And, of course, this is the easiest to develop, and therefore that we can just use the same kind of process for developing them that the pharmaceutical industry uses for attacking anything else with small molecules. And so it's not surprising that they are in the lead, so to speak, in terms of moving into the clinic. And some of them are going pretty well, but as again with any indication or with any target, there is a therapeutic index there. There's only so selective that you can plausibly be with a small molecule. So the other approaches that are being looked at are definitely worth evaluating properly. And the next one I want to look at is immunomodulators. So we're very interested in the possibility that the immune system could be targeted more powerfully against senescent cells. It's well established that the immune system already naturally eliminates senescent cells by and large. Senescent cells come into existence during wound healing especially, and most of those senescent cells go away again very soon afterwards. But some of them don't. So it's a bit similar, in fact it's very similar really, to the situation with cancer, where the immune system is really good at identifying cells that are making neoantigens, for example, and getting rid of them, but a small subset of cells figure out how to escape that surveillance, and so they go on and become proper cancers. So yeah, there's quite a bit of progress being made now in figuring out how to get the immune system to be a bit better at this. And in fact, SENS Research Foundation is doing some of that. I only know of one company in that space at the moment, but I'm sure there will be more because it's definitely promising. Then if we come to xenomorphics, essentially the idea here, of course, is to get senescent cells to be less senescent. And I remain to be convinced that this is a promising way to go. I think we have to take into account that the reasons why cells become senescent in the body are many and varied. And in particular, it's generally believed, and I certainly believe, that quite a lot of the time cells become senescent as a kind of self-prevention process to stop them becoming cancerous, because they have suffered a bunch of DNA damage that would otherwise make them cancerous. And of course, it would be better if cells like that always went into apoptosis, but we know that they sometimes don't, they sometimes go into senescence instead. It would obviously be a bad idea to desenesce those cells, because they would then proceed to become more cancerous and generally be bad for us. Now, of course, the people who work on xenomorphics are not dumb, and they're aware of this, and they are, trying to address it. But I am not yet optimistic. I'll just put it that way. Then finally, xenoblockers, interventions that try to stop cells becoming senescent in the first place. That's great, yeah, I mean, that's a fine thing to do, but honestly, it's not something that I personally am paying much attention to, simply because everything that we do at SENS Research Foundation is about rejuvenation. It's about taking damage that's already in existence and eliminating it from the body, as opposed to stopping the damage from coming into existence in the first place. So, I don't really have an opinion about xenoblockers right now in terms of where they are, how promising they are. I certainly think it's a valuable research area.
Brilliant. So a few of the companies, we profile 10 companies within the report, and they're all starting, well, quite a few of them are entering the clinical trial stage, phase 1. And I know you mentioned Unity in our first question. So what is the most important thing to consider when designing a clinical trial for a xenotherapeutic, in your opinion?
I don't really have any specific thing to mention that is different with xenotherapeutics than it would be for any other intervention that one might be in a clinical trial for. The standard things that one needs to look for are, picking the right patient population with the right exclusion criteria, designing the trial so that the placebo effect is minimized, of course, designing the trial so that the power is enough. In other words, the size of the trial is enough to get the result. Of course, if it's phase 1 you're looking at, then you're only looking for safety. But still, you want to get as good information as you can, so it's really believable. Essentially all the usual things. I don't think there really is anything particularly distinctive about xenotherapeutics as against your typical intervention.
So Aubrey, branching off from the last question, actually, to date, no xenotherapeutic has successfully entered phase 3 clinical trials, which really is the major milestone for validating the success of a therapeutic regimen. So given the significant mass of supporting data within preclinical trials, what do you believe is the greatest obstacle in the way of making the translational leap from preclinical data with model organisms to success within humans in clinical trials?
I'm kind of surprised at the question because honestly, it's been really fast so far. If the first paper from the Mayo Clinic and the Buck Institute collaboration that demonstrated the ability to rejuvenate rodents by eliminating senescent cells only came out 10 years ago. And that wasn't a pharmaceutical model, it was a genetic model where they'd messed around with particular genes so as to create a very accelerated accumulation of senescent cells, and then they'd made a second genetic modification that allowed the senescent cells to be all eliminated just with a simple hormone. So that was a proof of principle that it would be a good idea in theory if we could get rid of these cells. But even then, there was absolutely zero evidence that we could identify pharmaceuticals at all that would actually be selectively apoptotic to senescent cells. So I've got to say, I think things have gone insanely fast. Let's take Unity again. So Unity went into phase 1 clinical trials only like 3 years ago. And actually, you can also point to the business side of this as something really encouraging. Unity is the example I like to use. Obviously, they would be because they're in the lead, so to speak. They raised serious, like mid-9-digit capital before they'd even begun their first phase 1 clinical trial. I mean, that's just mind-blowing. It tells you very clearly where the smart money is from the investor community, and that's not going to go away. That's not going to go away. Even when this phase 2 result came out last year, and Unity's share price fell through the floor, I think it fell by a factor of something like 3. It's recovered half of that already, even though they haven't announced anything good since. The other trials that they're doing are still ongoing. So, I think I don't think there's anything. I don't think there are any obstacles. Is really to answer your question.
Oh, brilliant. I completely agree with you that the xenotherapeutic field is really moving at a tremendous pace. And this is reflected by the number of companies that are entering clinical trials this year and next year. It's just unprecedented. So one of the most promising developments within the xenotherapeutic realm is the utilization of artificial intelligence, high throughput screens, imaging technologies, et cetera, which are used to characterize senescence, find novel senescence-associated targets, develop targeted therapeutics, as well as validate their efficacy. So Aubrey, I was wondering what your thoughts are on technologies that really have potential to transform the field by enhancing the efficacy and or potential of xenotherapeutics.
So actually, the technologies that you just alluded to are really where I would start there. The thing I first want to say is that this is not only for xenotherapeutics, but it's particularly strong for aging, for things, aspects of aging, simply because aging is so complicated. It's this network of, every aspect of metabolism contributes to aging in one way or another. So really, yes, the use of machine learning is huge here. It allows patterns and distinctive features to be identified that human beings would not identify. And it is no accident that in silico medicine is doing so well, that it's been able to raise ridiculous amounts of money because it's delivering results. I'm not aware of anything specifically in the xenotherapeutic realm that in silico has highlighted so far, but I'm quite sure that's going to happen. They're using state-of-the-art machine learning techniques in a variety of different ways, and it's working. There are other companies like that. One of my favorites is Nuchido, which is based in the UK. Comes out of some research originally done by a professor named Malcolm Young in Newcastle. And he and one of his erstwhile postdocs, Nicola Connellan, went off and decided to make a company out of this. They are doing the same kind of thing with a rather distinctive approach to the algorithmic analysis of large amounts of data. It's very intriguing the way they go about this. And so far, they're mainly focused on calorie restriction mimetic type stuff, and NAD precursors and so on. But the technology is applicable across the whole of aging, and I believe, again, that the potential is enormous. So I think we're going to be seeing more and more of this. And as I say, it applies really, it could apply across the whole of medical research, but I think it's going to end up really coming into its own in relation to aging in general, because aging is so complicated.
Excellent. So leading into the next question, first generation xenotherapeutics really started off as repurposed chemotherapeutic drugs that lacked in significant target specificity, safety, and overall efficacy. And now a new wave of next generation xenotherapeutics are being discovered via these technologies you just mentioned, high throughput screened and designed based on advanced bioinformatics and AI approaches to help overcome some of these limitations. So I was wondering, out of small molecules, genetic medicines and gene therapies, immunotherapies, and CAR T, what are your thoughts on the types of therapeutics that hold the most promise in the xenotherapeutics realm?
So this is very much a timing thing. So on the pharmaceutical side, as you say, with the first generation ones were, often repurposed drugs that had somehow either failed or, not necessarily been recognized as relevant here. And of course, that's not a new idea. The repurposing is easier, not least because you've got a lot of information already, whether preclinical or even perhaps sometimes early stage clinical data. So the process of getting the rest of the way to the clinic with a new indication is going to be quicker. So that's all perfectly normal. But for the other types of thing you mention, even for things that are quite far along in other areas like CAR T, I think we have to remember that the platform technology itself is still very much moving forward. So let's talk about gene therapy as the real poster child of this, the real illustration. Gene therapy as a concept has been around for a very long time, but as we know, it's had serious fits and starts when it comes to taking it to the clinic. Essentially the whole field was set back by several years by the death of one person in a clinical trial about 20 odd years ago. Looking back, one would say, that's extremely unfortunate that the risk aversion of the general public and thus of the regulatory authorities is so intense that it ended up probably costing a hell of a lot of lives through this delay. But that's people for you. But yeah, so I mean, I think what we have to contend with here is that gene therapy in general is developing. It's getting better. We're identifying new vectors, identifying new methods for example, integrating DNA at a specific site with very high fidelity so that one minimizes and avoids off-target effects. Of course, we're seeing this played out rather much in the public eye in the case of CRISPR, because CRISPR itself in general is so new, and it has been found to be possible to identify variations on the CRISPR theme. In fact, identify usually means find in bacteria, in other bacteria, things that different bacteria are doing slightly differently that might have different benefits, different pros and cons. And it's no accident that there are companies focused on that. But that's where the real focus needs to be. as the platform technologies for delivery and so on get better year on year, and they're getting better really rapidly now, so each of these applications will benefit, as an application on its own.
So Aubrey, thank you. There's a lot of detail in your replies there. We've got another couple of minutes on our call here today, so we wanted to ask another couple of burning questions that we have from our team for you, if I may. So, Dara, do you want to fire off with your first lobby to Aubrey?
I mean, I was going to ask you about Unity, Aubrey, but we've definitely covered that. But I guess another one that I could probably ask you is, do you think that there would be any kind of precision for individuals using xenotherapeutics? So could it be based on kind of the disease progression, the demographic?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I always like to make sure that people have a sense of proportion when we talk about personalized medicine or whatever words we use to describe it. We always have to remember that personalized medicine is a stopgap, that we only need it when the generic medicine doesn't really work very well. Like I always say, we don't have personalized polio vaccines because we don't need them, because it just works for everybody. And so, yeah, it's kind of a temporary thing, but for the moment, in the near term, it's a very important temporary thing. So yes, absolutely. I mean, this works at several levels. So first of all, let's take osteoarthritis as the example we were using earlier. Of course, there is the simple thing: you don't give people treatments for osteoarthritis unless they've got osteoarthritis. But then, of course, there may be different ways in which you do the treatment depending on how advanced the osteoarthritis is. However, on top of that, there is the question of whether there are other personalized features, whether it be, for example, cancer susceptibility or other metabolic aspects, which may inform what is the best approach, what kind of senescent cells are likely to be most involved. So, of course, as we know, even within Unity, there are multiple different pathways of senescence that are being targeted by different pharmaceuticals. And of course, if we look at the sector overall, that diversity is considerably greater. So yes, absolutely. Picking your patient population to match the particular distinctive features of your own intervention is just as key here as it is in any other area of medicine.
Great, thanks, Aubrey. Girish?
Yeah, so I believe it was in February, the NIA recently announced funding for Longevity.Technology. So essentially the first start at targeting aging as an indication. And I was wondering how you felt about how this would influence the design, scope, and success rate of xenotherapeutics in clinical trials in terms of the biomarkers and clinical endpoints that can be targeted, and how companies should really be preparing for this possibility.
So the announcement you're talking about, one shouldn't exactly hold one's breath too much here, because it's very much an announcement at the beginning of the process, and anything that happens in government takes a fairly long time to actually see the light of day, really. There's a lot going on, especially in the US right now, in terms of the allocation of public money to areas of medical research that have previously been neglected, and certainly aging is foremost among that. One thing that's very much being talked about right now is this kind of health-specific counterpart to DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Now this, could be a really big deal. First of all, a sensible amount of money. Second of all, emphasizing blue sky, early stage, high risk, high reward projects. And by virtue of the fact that it would just be created for the first time, it'll inevitably start out relatively small, which means relatively nimble and responsive. But of course, it's also, everyone's aware that anything that's created in government has the risk of becoming not nimble at all very quickly indeed. So, a lot of people are trying to make that to stop that from happening, and make sure that ARPA-H, as they're calling it, is going to actually be able to fulfill its potential. Yeah, I mean, I'm talking to lots of people in this who are influential in the corridors of power, especially in the US, but also elsewhere, and helping them to know what to say. and who to talk to. But I'm crossing my fingers, but I'm not holding my breath. Put it like that.
Great, thanks, Aubrey. And obviously, being front and center as you are in so many aspects of the longevity sector, what do you feel xenotherapeutic companies need to do to attract investor interest, or what do you feel the sector needs to say to the investor community to take xenotherapeutics more seriously in terms of its capacity and potential for growth?
Well, I kind of come back to the answer I gave a few minutes ago, that it seems like they've already got it. So I'm kind of in the if it ain't broke, don't fix it camp on that at the moment. The rapidity with which Unity's share price recovered after the failure last time really, told me a hell of a lot. I was very, very pleasantly surprised by that. And of course, it's not just Unity I'm talking about here. The very fact that there is this explosion of other xenotherapeutic companies, that doesn't happen without investor interest. They have to actually, get investors in order to be a company, at least at the seed level. So, at this point, I don't think we have any additional argument to make. The investor community, at least a sufficiently large subset of the investor community, already gets it.
That's good to hear. Well, Aubrey, thank you so much for your time today. It's always a pleasure to see you, and thanks to the SENS Foundation for the support as well in developing this particular report we put together for the Market Intelligence Unit. So wonderful. Thanks for your time, Aubrey, and we'll see you again very soon. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. It's our pleasure. Thank you.